This was really interesting. The sort of practical side of the IMAX film format, I think, is both really interesting and fascinating, and also quite informative when looking at this upcoming release and thinking about it.
The stories he wants to tell are incredibly ambitious, and the way he wants to tell them is incredibly ambitious because he wants to do it all in camera. In this case, he wanted to do it 100% in IMAX, which had never been done, and that was...
It's still really cool that he is doing it 100% in IMAX.
We didn't know if we could do it.
Very nice to get some more sequences from the film itself.
The Odyssey is the first feature film shot entirely with IMAX film.
See, they keep saying that, and I believe it. But why are all the previews in the letterbox format? Why can't we see at least a 16:9 frame? I need someone to explain it to me, because I clearly, I'm just not getting it. I don't understand the reasoning behind this. We have, a film shot entirely on IMAX, unprecedented. So let's crop it all down as much as possible.
Each frame has resolution or image quality up to 3 times higher than digital.
Action!
The IMAX camera has to stop and be reloaded every 2.5 minutes or so.
2.5 minutes. That is crazy. And I'm very curious as to how that sort of impacts the production workflow and even just what kind of sequences you can do. It sounds like you wouldn't be able to make a film like 1917 on IMAX, trying to have those really long extended cuts, extended scenes. I'm also curious, so I know 65mm and 65mm IMAX are different. Kenneth Branagh, I know, shot his film Hamlet on 65mm. I just don't think I think it was scope, not IMAX, which is still a, significantly large film stock. But he did have these uncut sequences, or at least there's one in particular that I'm thinking of, which was definitely not stitched together. I mean, I remember a couple of years ago looking at some of the behind the scenes commentary and discussion of this, that there's a sequence in Hamlet where they're shooting on 65mm film, but they go for an extended period of time and sort of rotating around the cast without cutting, and how they had to kind of pace that out because they were shooting in a room full of mirrors and they needed to hide the cameras. So anyway, given that was a fairly large stock, I'm just curious sort of how the timing relates. Why you can film for longer on one and not the other. I mean, again, I know IMAX and 65mm are different, but 65mm is still not small.
Because the format is so large, that's the most film the camera can hold at one time. When the cameras are rolling, they're loud. The heavy-duty mechanism that pulls the film past the shutter sounds like a sewing machine in a fight with a stapler.
I'm really curious also, if the cameras are now quieter and you can do an entire film on IMAX, including all the dialogue sequences, if that's going to really change people's, filmmakers' opinion towards implementing more and more IMAX, right? Because obviously there's filmed for IMAX, which is, the filming on digital, but in the correct aspect ratio and with IMAX approved cameras that are digital. The Creator from a couple of years ago, I think, was filmed for IMAX. A lot of Marvel movies are filmed for IMAX, not filmed on IMAX the way this is. So you don't have the same problem with the digital. Obviously, it's not quite as loud because it's not film stock. I'm curious if making these film cameras quieter so you can do more of that dialogue will encourage more filmmakers these days to adopt this format as something that they want to film on, since there's so much more you can do with it now.
For the Odyssey, Nolan inspired the IMAX company to engineer a soundproof enclosure.
I mean, look at that thing. That's huge. That's massive. I don't think the cinematographer is doing much handheld cinematography with those. So I am curious to know, did they just use these soundproof ones for dialogue sequences anytime they were recording audio? And did they still use some of the lighter handheld forms of the IMAX cameras for action sequences and things like that, where they didn't really need the dialogue, but they wanted to get more of a dynamic shot?
They had to build special steel plating on the dollies to hold it. It was a lot. And we kind of kept shooting with it, and it kept working. It kind of dawned on us that we were going to make it through the production, and we were actually going to be able to shoot entirely on IMAX.
And that's also, it's a bit of a throwaway line, but it's also interesting that it seems like they set out not knowing if they can make this work. Because it's definitely been teased a lot. This is going to be the first film shot entirely on IMAX film cameras. We've heard this line plenty of times over the past year or so. Clearly there was a concern, but I'm curious if even as they were promoting that it's going to be shot entirely on IMAX, they might not be able to pull through on that.
Ron Juarez, a negative assembly technician, gave us a demonstration.
Yeah, what's also cool is Nolan's not the only director filming entirely on, or filming with film, and filming in the true IMAX film format. There are other directors doing that. But oftentimes when they do that, they film on the film stock, on the IMAX film stock, and then they scan it and edit it digitally, print that digital edit onto the IMAX film stock again, something like that. But it seems like that isn't what Nolan's doing here, but cutting and editing all of this by hand, the old-fashioned way, without transferring it onto digital. And he'll kind of explain why they do that.
Could you show us some splicing here?
So every time a scene changes, which can be dozens and dozens in a minute.
Yeah.
It's also crazy, like, given that they are doing it this slow, old-fashioned by hand way, to then think about how many cuts Nolan films often have, especially those montage sequences. It can be cutting tens and tens of times in a couple of seconds, or not tens of times in a couple of seconds, but like, you know, maybe 10 or 20 times in 30 seconds, if not more. That's a lot of editing. He doesn't film in a way that would minimize the number of cuts you need. He actually has a ton of cuts in his films.
That scene change was cut by hand.
Yes, so they're cut in another room. These are 2 pieces of negative now that he's going to splice together for us. And
So this isn't even where the cutting happens. They have an editing room somewhere else where they're doing all of this, and then they send it over to him to actually like clean it up and make sure that
every cut in the film, and there are thousands of cuts in the film, is done this way, by hand. Makes me nervous just watching it.
Look at the splicing machine. It looks like it was made in the 1940s.
It probably was.
Glue.
There's the glue. Yep.
In
really
this
cool to see.
digital universe, it's incredible to see an artist with a glue pot sticking this negative together.
And there it is.
Oh, nice. Very clean.
Yeah, look at
That
that.
takes incredible skill. It's a
That's just, again, like, you can watch that and think about, okay, they did that. But that's just one cut, however long that took, right there. It takes 20 seconds to just make one cut in the film.
really marvelous thing to see. Yeah, in this age of digitization, AI, all the rest, this is a human process, an analog process. This strip of film, that's the highest quality imaging format that's ever been devised. There's nothing that competes with it. It's a massive negative, which, when correctly exposed, correctly printed, and projected onto a huge screen, there's an image quality there that you can't get anywhere else. Incredible sharpness, very little visible grain.
The film is then color corrected using filters and
See, this is interesting too. I didn't know this. I didn't realize that even the color correction wasn't even done in sort of a digital way. I don't know if anyone really knew for sure. I mean, I'm sure some people knew for sure, but I think generally it seemed like the overwhelming consensus behind a lot of this was that, yeah, he shoots on film, but then brings it into a digital format to do a lot of the editing and then just prints it back onto film, because that's what everyone seems to do when they're shooting on film these days, because you still get the quality of the film in a lot of ways. You get the experience of shooting on film. You get to market it as shot on film, but you also don't have to deal with a lot of these like technological hurdles and drag of editing it by hand in this way. But even to just see that they're still coloring things in a very physical way. So much of this is done physically, not just the practical effects done in camera, but that the film is even worked on by hand as well.
prints from the negative. Lance Spindler is a lab color timer at Photochem. And you do the color correct here.
Yes.
How does that work?
So what we do is we initially do the coloring on an analyzer to get a
So that's fair. Like they scan it and then decide, sort of how they want to color it, and then they apply that by hand. But even that, they're not coloring it and then reprinting it.
closest to what Chris eventually wants. For example, we have a cyan filter. We have all 6. We have the primary colors and we have the secondary colors. And it adjusts for our look on the frames.
So they don't really get into much beyond this. I am curious sort of how they apply that across the board onto the print.
Most any other film would do this on a computer.
The standard practice is to do this on a computer. We've never done that. We've photochemical timing so that we can get the full benefit of all the information that's stored on the original negative. So it has analog color, which means infinite gradations of color. It's not broken into a series of numbers.
So that's interesting as well. I always assumed, right, like if you're going to scan it and then bring it into digital, even if you put it back onto an IMAX film stock, you're going to lose something in the process, because you're necessarily going to compress things down by bringing it into digital, right? If it is true, as he keeps saying, that this IMAX film stock has a quality that nothing else in the digital realm has been able to match, then why would you bring it into the digital realm? Because you're just necessarily going to lose part of the quality. You get a little taste of some of the sound behind the scene as well. Incredible IMAX sound. So this scene you do see in the trailer, but I didn't realize until we see this little featurette that the scene is actually inside the belly of the horse.
One of only a few in the country that can project 70mm film.
Some new shots from the film here as well. Like, all the stuff from Troy looks incredible. I mean, again, a lot of the cinematography and stuff in the trailer looks really good as well.
People in the industry talk about their fear that theaters like this and giant screens like that are going to be part of history.
This is definitely something that I wonder about. I'm sure executives whose whole job depends on the theater continuing to exist are much more concerned about this than I am. But even just as a consumer, I don't want to see theaters go away, and I actually wish that we had more IMAX film projectors and theaters equipped to do that than we have. I don't know what it would take to increase that number.
Theaters like this are part of history, and they're part of the future as well, unquestionably. I mean, what movies do for us as a way of experiencing a story together with this incredible empathetic response that you get, you know, when you watch a comedy in a room full of laughing people, or tragedy where everybody's sad at the same time. That's very, very important and very unique to cinema.
That is interesting that he highlights there the communal aspect of the film going experience. And it is true, when you go and see a film that's worth watching and you go and see it in theaters with a crowd that's invested and engaged, there's a different element to it than when you watch that same film at home alone.
The idea of the movie as a communal experience, as a place we come together to experience a story, I'm fully confident that's a part of our culture forever.
I certainly hope so. And I mean, we think stage plays haven't gone away. Concerts haven't gone away. People still go to those, even though they can get any music they want on demand at any time. Now, I think you can make an argument that, the concert going experience is different because you're seeing, your artist that you're a fan of there in person in real life. When you go to see a film, it is still just a recording. When you go to see a live play, however, the actors are still actually there in real life. So there is some difference there, but I think, again, it's going to see a film on the big screen really helps immerse you in a way that watching at home doesn't, and really bring you into the world of the film. Again, if the film's done well and worth watching. With that being said, thank you for watching and joining me for this discussion and look at these interviews. Be sure to subscribe on your way out